as we go back to the workforce, new year, diversity is always something that is brought up because not just in what makes us human, but
Mhm.
thoughts and feelings. And I mentioned earlier, I'm a dynamic person, so is everyone else, and we bring so much to the table. But what role does emotional intelligence play in creating more inclusive and diverse work environments? And how can leaders foster a sense of belonging in hybrid or remote teams?
Yeah, absolutely. To the diversity side of things, and really it focuses on empathy and inclusion. The main thing that people don't talk about enough when it comes to this is psychological safety. So understanding that as a high empathetic leader, as a highly emotionally intelligent leader, we are going to be creating more psychological safety with our teams. That's individuals, that's groups, that's two, threes, understanding that we need to provide that ability to have those conversations, to be able to express who we are, to express ideas, no matter what they are, to be able to give your team that is allowing them to be individuals. And some people will say, well, I don't want to open the floodgates for everybody just to be self expressive. Well, at the same time, that's where their skills lie, that's where their value truly lies. Their perspective is everything. So if we're not giving those conversation opportunities or opening those doors to have those conversations, we may be missing out on the next big idea, but also we're protecting our teams. If you're not engaging in those conversations, the likelihood of somebody leaving, or leaving on a bad note as well, and going out into the marketplace with that bad taste in their mouth for your company because you just weren't a good empathetic listening leader, that's problematic in the long term. Because I have been in that position before where my leaders did not listen to me or did not care, or it was not an empathetic, psychologically safe environment. And so I couldn't express things. And when I left there, I was the first person to tell people, like, oh, well, I knew you worked at such and such company. Would you recommend it? I was like, absolutely not. So the long-term effect and cost on attrition is big there. But when we come to the idea of an inclusive teams actually outperform other teams that are non-inclusive by 80%. So if you think about it, like, just give your team the ability to talk, to express ideas, and feel safe in that environment, that your teams are going to outperform other teams by 80%. That's worth lending an ear to somebody, or opening up conversations that are more dynamic. And understanding that we have to include the hybrid setting. I know that there's debates all over the place about we got to have our teams in office, or we're making everything fully remote. If you figure out how to work that and not be so restrictive on the in-person or in-office, um, uh, the policies and how we're keeping our teams in place, understanding that we can be more empathetic and we can open that psychological safety virtually as well, and understanding that we have so many people in that position that don't feel connected. So the more empathetic and the more open you are, the more likely you are to get higher performing individuals, whether they are in person or virtual or hybrid. Being able to be that empathetic leader and give people that ability to express themselves, to feel included, to feel part of a team, will drive performance and satisfaction through the roof.
Absolutely. And I recall getting my 2024 wrap up on for LinkedIn. And the title that came down as a descriptor to me was The Empath. So I feel real good about that
Mhm.
personally.
Oh yeah.
But I do know, similar to you, being in and recall being in an environment where psychological safety was not a thing, right? That
Mhm.
no
It's
one was
so
doing.
destructive.
And
It's
so
so
it
destructive.
was. And it was destructive. And to your point, I go on, someone else asks about that particular place, and you're like, no way. I
Mhm.
wouldn't suggest it. Now you go your route, but I would. And so, very great point there for leaders to understand is that it's not just the effect that you have at the moment when you're not having or providing a psychologically safe environment. It's
Mhm.
what happens after and from there. It's like a snowball effect, if you will, or dominoes going down the road. It will eventually affect you.
When I work with teams or organizations, or I'm consulting leaders, that's one of the top questions I ask. Like, how would you rate your connectivity and your relationship with your team? And it's a 360 too, because I'll ask them and they may say, "Oh, it's great. Everybody, I'm connected with everybody and everybody, we have a great relationship." But when I go talk to the people that they work with or that they lead, and there's a different story there, a lot of it comes down to they're just not listening, or they're telling me things without asking me my thoughts or giving a why. And so, some leaders will say, "Well, I don't need to give up that much power." I'm like, it's not power. Power is in the idea that we are creating inclusive teams. And so, by just listening, by just creating that psychologically safe space, you are actually having more power as a leader and you're growing your team around you, which actually makes you a better leader. So, that listening factor is humongous and so underrated in the workforce nowadays.